It was a Tuesday afternoon when I first met Alex, their eyes darting nervously as they helped me carry the heavy cardboard box up 3 flights of stairs to my new apartment. The box contained blackout curtains, thick, heavy fabric designed to block out every trace of light from the outside world. I hadn't expected to need them when I signed the lease, but the street lamp positioned directly outside my bedroom window made sleep impossible without them. "These things weigh a ton," Alex commented, adjusting their grip on the awkward package. "What are you trying to do? Create a photography darkroom or something?" I laughed, explaining about the street lamp, but there was more to it than that. The truth was, I'd always found comfort in creating spaces that were entirely my own, sheltered from prying eyes and judgment. The apartment was still mostly empty, a few pieces of secondhand furniture scattered around like islands in a beige carpeted sea. I'd only been in town for 3 weeks, having moved for a job that promised new beginnings after a particularly difficult year. Alex was a colleague who had offered to help me settle in, and though we'd only known each other for a short time, there was something about them that put me at ease. Perhaps it was the way they never pushed for more information than I was willing to give, or how they filled silences with stories about the neighborhood without making me feel obligated to reciprocate with details of my own life. "So where are these going?" Alex asked, setting the box down in the living room and stretching their back. I led them to the bedroom, where the problem was immediately apparent. The large window faced an apartment building across the street, and the street lamp created a spotlight effect directly into my most private space. "Wow, it's like you're on stage," Alex observed, and I nodded, feeling the familiar discomfort that came with being visible when I didn't want to be. "These curtains aren't just about sleep," I admitted. "They're about creating a boundary between me and the world." Alex nodded, understanding in their eyes. Everyone needs a place where they can just be, without performing for others. This was why I had been drawn to Alex from the beginning. They seemed to understand the importance of safe spaces without needing it explained. In a world that demanded constant exposure, constant sharing, constant performance, the idea of a room where no one could see and felt almost revolutionary. Let me explain why this matters so much. In our hyper-connected society, privacy has become a luxury rather than a right. We're expected to share our locations, our thoughts, our meals, our relationships, all for public consumption and commentary. The pressure to be constantly visible, constantly available, can be exhausting for anyone, but especially for those of us who have experienced the darker side of visibility. "I brought tools," Alex said, pulling a small toolbox from their backpack. "I figured you might not have unpacked yours yet." This thoughtfulness was characteristic of them, always anticipating needs without making a big deal about it. As we unpacked the curtains, the heavy black fabric unfurled like a promise of protection. The curtain rod was substantial, designed to hold the weight without bending. "This is serious business," Alex commented, measuring the window frame. "These aren't your average, keep the sun out while you sleep in curtains. These are create your own personal void curtains." I laughed, but they weren't wrong. The blackout curtains I'd chosen were top of the line, designed not just to block light, but to create an almost soundproof barrier between inside and outside. "My last apartment had paper-thin walls," I explained as we worked together to secure the mounting brackets. "I could hear everything my neighbors did, which meant they could hear everything I did. It made me feel like I was always on display, even when I was alone." Alex nodded, handing me a screw. "It's exhausting, isn't it? Always feeling watched, even when no one's there." The process of hanging the curtains became a dance of sorts, with Alex and me moving around each other in the limited space of my bedroom. There was something intimate about the task, the shared purpose, the proximity, the occasional brush of hands as we passed tools back and forth. We talked as we worked, about small things at first, the office, the neighborhood, recommendations for local restaurants. But as the afternoon wore on, our conversation deepened, as if the act of creating this safe space together allowed for more vulnerable exchanges. "My family never understood my need for privacy," I found myself saying as we struggled to level the curtain rod. "They took it personally, like I was rejecting them by wanting to close my door. Everything was communal in our house, spaces, possessions, even thoughts and feelings. There was this unspoken rule that keeping things to yourself was selfish." Alex was quiet for a moment, focused on tightening a screw. "That's a common misconception," they finally said. People confuse privacy with secrecy, but they're not the same thing. Privacy is about having control over what you share and when. It's not about having something to hide. This distinction resonated with me deeply. I'd spent years feeling guilty about my desire for private space, as if it indicated some fundamental flaw in my character. But the way Alex framed it made perfect sense. Privacy wasn't about deception or shame. It was about autonomy and self-care. Hold this end up a bit higher, Alex directed, and I adjusted my grip on the curtain rod. The metal was cool against my fingers, solid and reassuring. There was something deeply satisfying about the physical act of creating boundaries, of saying, this space is mine, and I decide who gets to see inside. By the time we had the rod securely mounted, the afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the room. Alex helped me thread the curtains onto the rod, the heavy fabric sliding with a satisfying swish. The moment of truth, they said as we prepared to hang the fully assembled curtain. It took both of us to lift it into place, the weight more substantial than I had anticipated. With a final push, the brackets clicked into place, and suddenly the curtains were hanging, ready to fulfill their purpose. Let's see how they look, I said, reaching for the edge of the fabric. With a single smooth motion, I pulled the curtains closed, and the effect was immediate and dramatic. The room, which had been bathed in afternoon sunlight, was plunged into a twilight dimness. The outside world, the street, the neighboring buildings, the passing cars, all vanished behind the impenetrable barrier of fabric. The change wasn't just visual. There was an acoustic difference too, a muffling of the street sounds that had been a constant background to our work. Wow, Alex said softly, looking around the transformed space. It's like we're in a completely different place. And it was true. The room felt smaller, more intimate, but also somehow more expansive, as if by shutting out the external world, we'd created a space of infinite possibility. The air felt different too, still and expectant, as if waiting for us to fill it with whatever we chose. This is exactly what I wanted, I said, running my hand along the edge of the curtain. The fabric was smooth and cool to the touch, substantial in a way that felt protective rather than constraining. Alex walked to the center of the room, turning slowly to take in the effect from all angles. You know what we should do? They said, a playful note entering their voice. We should see how well they actually work. From the outside. I raised an eyebrow, not quite following. What do you mean? Alex gestured toward the window. Let's go outside and look up at your window. See if we can see anything inside. Test how well they hide us. There was something in the way they said hide us that caught my attention, not hide the room or block the light, but hide us, as if we were now a unit, a collective entity seeking shelter together. The suggestion sparked a mixture of curiosity and anxiety in me. On one hand, I wanted to know if the curtains were as effective as promised, if they truly created the impenetrable barrier I longed for. On the other hand, the idea of standing outside, looking up at my own window, felt strangely vulnerable, as if I would be exposing something intimate about myself to the world. We don't have to, Alex added quickly, sensing my hesitation. It was just an idea. No, let's do it, I decided. I want to know if they work as advertised. Before we left, Alex suggested we set up a test. They positioned my desk lamp in the center of the room, turning it on to its brightest setting. If we can see this light from outside, then the curtains aren't doing their job, they explained. It was a simple but effective test, and I appreciated the methodical approach. We left the lamp burning brightly and made our way downstairs and out onto the street. The evening air was cool against my skin as we stood on the sidewalk across from my building, looking up at what I knew was my window. From this vantage point, my apartment was just one of many, a single dark rectangle in a grid of illuminated and shadowed spaces. Which one is yours again? Alex asked, squinting up at the building. The fact that they couldn't immediately identify my window was already a good sign. I pointed it out, and we both stared intently, looking for any sign of the bright lamp we'd left burning inside. I don't see anything, Alex said after a moment. Not even a hint of light around the edges. I had to agree. The window was completely dark, indistinguishable from any other unoccupied room in the building. The curtains were working perfectly, creating an impenetrable barrier between my private world and the public one. There was something powerfully affirming about this moment, standing on the outside, looking at a space that contained pieces of myself but revealed nothing to unwanted observers. "Let me explain why this matters so much," I said quietly, still looking up at the darkened window. "All my life, I felt like I was living in a glass house. Like people could see through me, see all my vulnerabilities and insecurities, no matter how hard I try to hide them. These curtains, they're not just about blocking light or creating privacy. They're about having one place where I don't have to worry about being seen, where I can let down all my guards and just exist without judgment." Alex was quiet for a moment, their face thoughtful in the glow of the street lamp. "I understand that," they finally said. "Everyone deserves a space where they can be their authentic self without fear of scrutiny. But there's something else to consider too." They turned to look at me directly. "Sometimes the walls we build to protect ourselves can also become prisons that keep us isolated. The challenge is finding the balance, creating safe spaces without completely disconnecting from the world." Their words struck a chord with me, touching on a fear I hadn't fully acknowledged even to myself. Was my desire for privacy actually a form of hiding? Was I using these curtains not just as a boundary, but as a barrier, keeping out connection along with unwanted observation? "I'm not suggesting you should live without curtains," Alex continued, seeming to sense my internal conflict. "God knows we all need our private spaces. I'm just saying that the ability to control when the curtains are open and closed is as important as having them in the first place." We stood in silence for a moment, both contemplating the darkened window and all it represented. Then Alex suggested we go back upstairs to see the space from the inside again. The walk back to my apartment felt different somehow, charged with a new awareness. When we re-entered my bedroom, the lamp was still burning brightly, creating a warm pool of light in the center of the room. But now, with the curtains drawn, that light belonged only to us, a private sun in a private universe. "It's strange," I said, looking around the enclosed space. "From outside, this room doesn't exist. It's just darkness, indistinguishable from any other dark window. But inside, there's all this light and life." Alex nodded, running their hand along the edge of the curtain. "That's the beauty of it, isn't it? You get to decide who sees the light and life. You get to control the narrative of your own space." The conversation might have continued in this philosophical vein, but we were interrupted by a sharp knock at the front door. The sound was jarring in the cocoon-like quiet we'd created, and I felt a momentary panic, as if the outside world was forcibly intruding into our sanctuary. "Are you expecting someone?" Alex asked, and I shook my head. The knock came again, more insistent this time. We looked at each other, and something passed between us, a shared recognition of the intrusion, but also a shared resolve to face it together. "I should see who it is," I said, moving toward the bedroom door. Alex nodded, following a step behind. The contrast between my darkened bedroom and the rest of the apartment, still lit by the fading daylight, was striking, like moving between different worlds. I approached the front door cautiously, peering through the peephole to see my next-door neighbor, an elderly woman who had introduced herself when I first moved in. When I opened the door, she apologized for disturbing me, but explained that she'd noticed a package delivered to my door earlier and wanted to make sure I knew it was there, as there had been some thefts in the building recently. It was a thoughtful gesture, and I thanked her sincerely. As we chatted briefly about the building and the neighborhood, I was acutely aware of Alex standing a few feet behind me, and of my bedroom door standing open, revealing the darkness beyond. Two worlds, separated by a threshold, the public face I presented to my neighbor and the private space I shared with Alex. After my neighbor left, I closed the door and turned to find Alex watching me with an unreadable expression. "What?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious. They smiled slightly. "I was just thinking about how different you seemed just now, talking to your neighbor versus how you are when it's just us." "Not in a bad way," they added quickly. "Just an observation about the different versions of ourselves we present in different contexts." Their observation was astute and touched on something fundamental about human interaction. We all have multiple versions of ourselves that we deploy in different situations: the professional self, the family self, the friend self, the private self. None of these versions is necessarily more or less authentic than the others. They're simply different facets of a complex whole. "I think that's normal," I said as we walked back toward the bedroom. "We all contain multitudes, right? The person I am with colleagues isn't the same as the person I am with close friends or family. Exactly, Alex agreed, following me back into the darkened bedroom. And that's where spaces like this become so important. They're not just about hiding from others. They're about having a place where you don't have to choose which version of yourself to be. You can just be all of them, or none of them, without having to explain or justify yourself to anyone. This articulation of what I had felt but never fully expressed was like a revelation. Yes, that was exactly it. Not hiding, but integrating. Not concealment, but authenticity without performance. We stood together in the center of the room, surrounded by the protective darkness created by the curtains. The lamp still burned brightly, illuminating our faces but contained within our private world. There was something powerful about this shared experience, the knowledge that we were invisible to the outside world but fully present to each other. It created a unique intimacy, a sense of being co-conspirators in the creation of this sanctuary. Should we open them again? Alex asked after a moment, gesturing toward the curtains. Let the world back in. The question felt weighted with significance beyond the literal act of opening curtains. It was about choice, the power to decide when to be visible and when to retreat, when to engage and when to protect oneself. Yes, I said after a moment's consideration. But not because we have to, because we choose to. Together, we moved to the window and, with a synchronized motion, pulled the curtains apart. Light flooded back into the room. The warm glow of the setting sun, the artificial brightness of the street lamp beginning to flicker to life, the distant illumination of windows in the building across the street. The outside world reasserted itself, but it felt different now. Not an invasion, but a chosen connection. The boundary remained, but it had become permeable, controlled by our will rather than by fear or obligation. As we stood looking out at the city, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the curtains that provided the protection I needed, for Alex who understood that need without judgment, and for the new understanding I had gained about the complex interplay between concealment and revelation, privacy and connection. Thank you for helping with this, I said, gesturing toward the curtains. It means more than you know. Alex smiled, their face illuminated by the last rays of sunlight. That's what friends are for, helping each other create safe spaces, and then sometimes gently suggesting when it might be okay to peek out from behind them. There was warmth in their voice, and a depth of understanding that made me feel seen in a way that was comforting rather than exposing. In that moment, I realized that true safety wasn't about perfect isolation or impenetrable barriers. It was about having the power to choose when to be visible and when to retreat, and having people in your life who respected and supported those choices. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across my bedroom floor, I knew that these curtains would become an important part of my daily ritual, drawing them close to create my sanctuary when needed, opening them to connect with the world when desired. They represented not just a physical boundary between inside and outside, but a psychological one as well, a tangible reminder of my right to privacy and my power to control my own exposure. In the days and weeks that followed, Alex and I continued to build our friendship, finding in each other a shared understanding of the delicate balance between connection and autonomy. Sometimes we would sit in my apartment with the curtains drawn, creating our private universe where conversations could unfold without the weight of external observation. Other times, we would deliberately leave them open, a symbolic invitation to engage with the world beyond our safe space. The blackout curtains remained a constant in my life, a physical manifestation of an important psychological truth, that privacy is not the enemy of authenticity, but often its prerequisite. In a world that increasingly demands constant visibility and performance, the act of drawing curtains closed can be a radical assertion of self-determination. Not because we have something to hide, but because we have something to protect, the vulnerable, unfiltered self that needs space to exist without judgment or expectation. And sometimes, when the curtains are drawn and the outside world is held at bay, we find that we are not hiding from others so much as finding ourselves, discovering aspects of our identity that can only emerge in the safety of private space. This is the paradox of concealment. Sometimes we must hide in order to be found, retreat in order to advance, disconnect in order to more authentically connect. The curtains that Alex helped me hang that Tuesday afternoon were not just about blocking light or creating privacy. They were about claiming the right to define the boundaries of my own existence, to decide when to be seen and when to be invisible. In the end, perhaps that is what we all seek. Not absolute privacy or complete exposure, but the freedom to move between these states according to our own needs and desires. The blackout curtains hang in my window still, a daily reminder that visibility is a choice, not an obligation, and that the most authentic connections often begin in spaces where we feel truly safe to be ourselves. Total _char_count, 18,642.